Okay, welcome to the Digital Indigenous Beading Circle's 4th teaching. Today we're going to cover finishing off bracelets. And basically these can also be used to finish off necklaces, obviously, some chokers and different things like that. Maybe even if you want to make a beaded bookmark as well. So I'm going to cover ways of finishing off a bracelet or finishing off your bead loom piece. I'm going to start with using bead tips. These are called bead tips to hide knots and create loops to attach hardware. I will also cover finishes for end tubes, which is this type of finish on a bracelet. I will show how to use a ribbon clamp to finish off a bracelet, and this is can also be used for a bookmark. This is a good one for bookmarks because they're quite flat. I will cover how to attach it to a jump ring or some type of ringed closure. So we're starting with the bead tip one, and what you need if you're going to use a bead tip version of closure is you're obviously going to need the bead tips. It helps that you have enough threads on either end, you know, at least 4. Well, you could probably get away with even 2 inches if you're good at tying knots. And we're only going to do one end of this in this closure. And so you need the bead tips. You need some type of closure. This is going to be a circle and bar closure that it just goes through there and then like that to keep it closed. And then you need some jump rings. You'll need scissors for every single type of closure that we're going to cover. I find it really helps to have a big needle. You can also use a toothpick. You could use a paper clip opened up. You could use a large pin if you have one. Your beading needle is a little bit too fine to be using for knot work, although even one like this is big enough. This is a regular sewing needle, but I like the larger one because it's a little bit easier to handle and move the threads around. And then you'll also need pliers. Not necessarily, I mean, if you want to damage your fingernails, you could probably open that jump ring with your nails, and you could probably close this as well. But it's much easier if you have some type of plier. This is just regular needle nose that comes in many different toolkits. These are miniature craft ones. I got at Dollarama. And then these are a special type of beading rounded pliers that help you shape the wire more smoothly when you're working with jump ring circles or any kind of closure like that. Needle nose can be sometimes a little too angular, and it ruins some of the curves. Okay, so we have all our supplies here, and I'm going to work on this end for this type of closure. And we have our warp threads. These are all our warp threads, and this was the weft thread. This is the end that we started with in our last teaching. And so what I'm going to do is thread the needle. I'm just going to use a sewing needle so you can see. But with your size 11, if you're working with your size 11 beads on the bead loom, you'll want to use your beading needle for this. So this is the weft thread. That's the one that we started with. And we're just going to weave it back into the work. And weaving in your threads is something that you're going to do for a lot of different finishes. And I'm using the really large beads again so that we can see a little bit better. I hope this is going to work. And you just thread your needle and then just go right next to it and maybe go through 2 and come up. You could go through just 1 as well. And then go over to the row below, go through that 1 gold there. And then I'm going to come back up to that row just above. You're never going to go more than 1 row or 1 bead over when you put your thread back in. You can go 2 beads over and as the needle moves through, but putting the needle into a new bead should only be 1 over. So I'm going to put it through 1 there, and basically you're just trying to get it in there, pull it tight, and it's kind of like weaving it in to get stuck inside. And so now I'm going to go up to the very top row, and I'm going to pull through on one side of the middle and add that in with all these threads here. Now for this demonstration, I'm going to show you, let's see, how many should we do? I think I'm only going to do 2 of these on this end. So I'm going to need to thread. So we have 6 threads plus that 6 warp threads plus the weft thread that's right here. And I'm going to put 3 on one and 4 on another. So I'll have to thread these 3 through that little hole there. That's going to take a little bit of work. Just going to cut the end here to open it up. And we'll start with the 3, well, you know what? Let's do the 4 and get it out of the way, get the pain out of the way. Because 4 is going to be even harder to get through there. So I start with having them all together. You want to move those ones out of the way. Having them all together, and I twist it up so that you can, basically you're making a thicker piece of thread based off of 4 threads. And when you have them all together, you can trim that there so that they're all the same length. You don't really want to let go because you'll see it spreads out. Now I'm not going to show you that I'm going to wet it with my mouth. You could use water, but I always use my saliva because saliva actually, not sure what it is, but has something in it that helps it sort of stick together a little bit better than water does. Although I suppose you could use wax as well. Wax would work quite well. So I use my saliva there, and I used a good amount of saliva so that it all sticks together. Now sometimes these are so bent that it's a little difficult to see your work. And so what I'm going to do is I need to thread it through the bottom part. This is going to be a loop that attaches to hardware, and this is going to close up this little clamshell. Sometimes you'll have them listed as clamshell. So now I'm just going to try and get it into that hole there. It's not going to help you to see. You'll see when you actually have your own little bead tip to go through. There, I got all 4 through. I made that seem easy. Keep in mind I've been doing that for a very long time. If you like, you could have added a few beads beforehand so that you had a couple beads lined up, 1, 2, 3. If you wanted to make your bracelet longer and have the beads match, and hides the threads a little bit better as well. But I just want to show you how to attach this, so I'm not going to worry about that because this bracelet will be taken apart probably anyways. And re-add it to my beads again. This was only a demo bracelet. So I'm still working with that twisting, gaining it all back in there. And what our goal is to tie a knot as close as we can inside that little space there in the fold of that clamshell. And to do that, I really like using a large needle. Like I said, you can use a toothpick or a paper clip. Toothpick, though, I will say it could possibly get slivered on the threads and therefore cause a problem, making things uneven and having to start again. So I'm tying a knot. I haven't done it all the way yet. I'm just a simple through the circle type knot. So I haven't pulled it at all. It'll want to twist, and you'll have a loop there, which is the hole. So that's the hole. It wants to twist. You have your big needle so that you can hold that in place. And I'm going to pull. I'm going to lay my needle down so that almost like a crossbar. And I'm going to pull these threads towards me, and that'll slowly move the knot closer and closer and closer. And now it's as I've pulled it really firmly. My fingers are red from how hard I'm pulling, and it's like when you tie a package, a ribbon on a package. You got to hold that tight. Sometimes it helps if you have another person to hold it, but in these circumstances we really don't. Still holding it tight. I don't want to lose that knot. And then I slide that out. And that should be pretty close. I think it could be a little closer, but you see how it loosens up right away. Mind you, these are getting loose as well. So that's pretty close though. That's pretty good. You can leave it at that, or depending on how many threads you have, it might be thick enough. But if not, I suggest doing it again. It doesn't hurt to have a bigger knot that it doesn't come through the hole there. Again, you want to make this circle part as large as you can so you can pull these threads through easily. Get that back in there again. The second one is a little bit harder to line up. So, because ideally you want to get it over top of the last knot. I apologize if you can't see this. It's hard to move these hardware. Okay. So I'm putting it back into that circle there. Hi. Did I get through? There we go. Alright, and I'm pushing as close as I can and releasing. Look, I got right beside it. See, it's not easy. But I'll try one more time because there's enough room in the clamshell for this. Okay, try one more time. Well, it helps if you sort of go behind. All right, there we go. See if we can't get that over top of slowly finesse it over top of the older one, or the second last one we did. I think I did get over top. Good. So that's right on top of the other one. There's another one behind it. And all we're going to do, I'm going to use my pliers. Actually, I'll start off using just my fingers to close this. I start to close it. I don't close it all the way yet because I want to make sure that the knot is completely inside. So I need to poke that in there a little bit. And now you can close it with your fingers at this point, but it makes it a little bit, I don't know, it's a little more difficult to get it completely shut. Right. And there we go. Now some people would cut the threads ahead of time, but I'm not going to do that because this is not, well, yeah, okay, might as well. I might as well just cut them now. If you have to go back and do it again or something, it slips out or whatever, you might want to wait till the last possible minute to cut these threads. I typically probably wouldn't cut them until I had all my bead tips on. And there, now you have a bead tip on. And it is nicer if you have a bead there going next to it. But if you don't, you don't. You do the same for this side, which I'm not going to show you because you just saw it. And if you're on a video, you can rewind and rewatch it if you need to. But I will point out that this end is quite loose still, and because I pushed this so tight, it got all bumpy here. But you can smoothen that back out, and when I smoothened that back out, or smoothed it back out, this ended up getting much closer to the edge there. So it's exactly where we want it to be. Once you have both of these on, then you can either attach directly to hardware, just by putting that on there, and taking your pliers and closing the ring. Or if you need it to be, oh sorry, yeah, and then you'd attach the other one to this side, so that you'd have, sorry, so that you'd have this bead, one of these on here, and have that connect to here as well. And it's that simple. And then the other side, you do the same thing. One would connect to the other, and one would connect to the other. Now, if you want to make your bracelet longer, you can always add your jump rings in between to make it a little bit longer each time. And in this situation, Andrea attached a large jump ring and then a bit of a chain. And usually a chain is finished with a bit of a drop bead or some kind of bead there to make it look nicer. And then that way you can have that at any length you want when you have the chain there. So that can be useful. So that's the bead tip, how to put on a bead tip and then therefore put on hardware. The next one we're going to do, let's see, is the end tube. So I'm going to put this one aside for now, and we'll show you a different technique with that one after. So this one, I have it set up to do the end tube on one end, on this end. So let's move this hardware out of the way. We may need those jump rings. We need our end tubes, which are these. And basically it's everything that you needed for the last situation, except for instead of bead ends, you need end tubes. And for this one, we're going to do a lobster claw closure at that end. So I'm only going to do the one end because this end, the other end, I'm going to do something else as a demonstration. So I'll put away one of these. So this is what we need. And I've already started by tying a knot. And I tied that one relatively close. You'll want to do the same thing again to this side. And you can't see it very well, but this is the weft thread. I used a fire line. I like to use fire line sometimes because it makes it more firm if I want a firmer sort of cuff-like bracelet. But also it makes it extremely durable, like rough and tumble. So that's really great for kids, which makes it, better than the nylon thread. Mind you, you shouldn't really be doing that to some beadwork anyways. So I'm just going to do what I did before for the bead tips. Gonna twist that, and I when I twist, it started to go towards the edge. I'd rather it go towards the middle, so I'm gonna slant it this way when I twist, so that the twist will go more towards the middle, the knot will go more towards the middle, and that way it keeps it inside the tube a little bit easier before you close it. So, just like before, making a big circle. Haven't fully pulled that through yet. I got the circle all ready. I'm going to put the large needle behind. And a large needle really is the best if you have it, because you're putting so much pressure on it, but also having more room here, and with the pressure, if you use a paper clip, it might bend the paper clip with all the pressure that you're using. So I'm going as close as I can again, pulling as tight as I can. Just wants to move around. Sorry. Let's lay this flat. All right. So I'm pulling that really tight again, and slip that out. I often will take my nail, my thumbnail, and hold it while I finish pulling it extra tight after the needle is gone. And so you'll notice that it gets close, but not super close. There's a little bit of room there, which is totally fine for our purposes. In fact, for our purposes right now, it's a good thing. Martha Stewart, it's a good thing. Okay, so I'm going to snip that off. You want to go close, but not crazy close. The one that's hard to trim right now is that fire line. It's actually difficult to cut with scissors. That's how great it is. And so this is what I have. And what's going to happen is there's a slit in this tube here, and this is going to slide right on. So sometimes you'll have the tubes open at both ends when you get them. But this one's only open at the one end. This end is mostly closed. And you do want one end closed when you start, so that the threads don't come out and you don't go too far. Now, of course, when you're doing this, you're going to want to make sure that you have an end tube of an appropriate size. This one's about right. I like to have it just a touch bigger, but you could also have it just a touch smaller or spot on the size. Sorry, I don't like it a touch larger. I like it a touch smaller. Sorry, because I often like the bracelet focus to make sure that it's all right here. And if there's extra shine on the inside, I feel like it kind of takes away from the design as you move your wrist. I know, small, silly little details. So now what I'm going to do is take that last row and put my nail, or you could You could take your library card or your Presto card, or I'm just using the end of this little shovel I made. I also could just take my needle and lay it flat in there. And so you see how, I hope you can see, that I have this space there, so that this last row is on the end there. And you're just going to grab onto the end there. It can be a little difficult to hold on to. You may want to use pliers to hold on to it. Ooh, if you can get the tip there. It's a little bit easier to hold on to with pliers. And you're just going to slide that in there. Oof. Maybe I need to bend that out a little bit more before I do this, so it's getting caught. Okay, let's try this again. There we go. I got it through one thread, two thread, almost all the way through there. All right, we got that all in. I'm going to take the other end of my needle because this one's a little too sharp. I'm just going to poke that in there. And now I'm just going to fold this end over. So we closed that in with my hand, and then we just secure it there with the pliers to make sure it's nice and even. So there, that's on. And now we grab our closure and our jump ring. If your jump ring is closed, you just take pliers and open it up. This one's opened up already. And put it through your lobster claw end there and through the end of the end tube. I like to use pliers to put the jump rings back together because when there's a lot of hardware there, it becomes difficult to make sure that it's all closed, and that is not closed yet. That's closed, almost closed. Flatten it. These. Ooh. See, it's difficult to hold all this stuff at once. All right. And that is on, and that's closed. There we go. So that's the one end, and then for the other end, I would put a few jump rings on, or in this case, Andrea added a large jump ring and then some chain and then a little drop bead for the end there. So, okay, now we're going to do the clamp, ribbon clamp ends. So this one's already done on this side. I took off the one from this side from before so that I could show you how to do it. And basically, just like with the end tube one that we just did, just like that, you're going to have a few rows that end up in the hardware. So I have 2 rows there. I believe I originally had 3, but it was too much for this ribbon clamp. It wasn't deep enough. And I've already attached a magnet closure with jump rings to the hardware. And you'll notice that some beads are missing here. They broke when I clamped it on the first time. Delicate beads are particularly delicate, which makes sense. And so what you need is obviously your bracelet, your closure, jump rings, and ribbon clamp. You need a small piece of fabric that's going to go over the end to protect the beads, which I wish I had done originally for that, but also to help keep the clamp on a little bit better. You'll need your needle to tie your threads in a few knots there, just a few. I only did 3 there, that's all I needed. And then of course scissors. to cut those threads, which they're already cut, and then some pliers to close the clamp around. So you take the small piece of fabric and you want to make sure that you're going past that gap in the rows, just a little bit past. Fold it over onto the other side. Oh yeah, sorry, you want to make that gap like you did for the end tube one. So you fold that over, not too far over, but far enough. You're going to trim it down afterwards. And so all of that is inside. Your knots are inside. You want to make sure it's flat and not rolled over. And for me, it is flat. I opened up my ribbon clamp a little bit more so that I could get over the fabric as well. You're gonna slide that in there and center it onto your bracelet. So make sure that that center piece is down the center of your bracelet. It's easy for this one because there's a center column. So I have that on there. I'm holding it in place and I'm gonna start to clamp it just a little bit. Always enter from this side. If you go from here, you may end up breaking some beads there and you'll have to replace it. Mind you, if you forget and you broke, oop, that slid out of place. So you gotta be careful. If you did break some, you can fix them. You close a little bit on each end at a time. Always making sure that it's still centered as you close it. Clamp it some more, all the way along. You can also use a rubber mallet and hammer it down. So that's centered. I've got my fabric. My fabric shifted. I used just a thin ultra suede. Now I'm going to trim down the sides. It helps to have needle nose scissors. And I see that that end needs to be closed a little more. That's still centered, yeah, okay. Trim this side close to the edge. And now you're going to leave, less than 1 millimeter of fabric behind when you trim this close to the edge of the ribbon clamp. Whoosh. All right. I'm just going to adjust those beads a little bit. Now, I kind of think that that was too fat, and I probably should have moved only kept 1 row of beads in there, just like we did for the slide-on end tubes. So I'm just gonna move that previous row down so that there's only 1 end in there, because it wasn't catching it anyway. Let's see if we can't close this a little bit. Oh. That side a little bit better. All right, and there we are. We have the clamp on. You might need to trim it down a little bit, like if you see little pieces sticking out. Now there's a broken bead there. I'm gonna have to fix that after, but don't worry. If a bead gets broken, you can weave in a new one. We probably won't cover that tonight, but we will cover it, so you'll be able to do that. So that's the ribbon clamp one. Now I'm going to do the tying the tube one. Tying onto a ring, or jump ring, or a ringed closure. Now for this one, you need your bracelet, obviously. You need some beading thread and your beading needle. And you need your closure, or if you're using a jump ring, then you need your jump ring and then a closure to attach to the jump ring. But we have we have a closure that has rings on it. And you have to weave in your ends. So all these ends, I wove those in. So now what I'm going to do, that's a finished end. It's chunky because it's a big beads. And I'm going to take this piece, and I'm going to start down about the 4th row and just go in and weave it through like we did when we were tagging in ends. And just make sure you're always only going 1 bead over. You don't move 2 beads over at a time. You can go through 2 at a time, which I'm about to do. So 2 more, and I'm gonna go up to the top and make that a rectangle and go back up to the top again because I want it in there nice and secure. So now I'm going to come back up through this middle there. Oops, that's my end. You can cut that off after. Take this piece, go right through the center one, or you can just put it onto jump rings, and then just weave back in through here. So that it's on the center one there. Ooh. So there, now it's in the center. I'm going to go back through that center again one more time. Careful not to tangle your threads. All right, so that center one is on. Pull it tight. I'm going to have to center it a little bit more, but pulling on either side will help. So now we go through that last loop there. Go to the row below. Go up again. I like to do these always twice. So that I did twice. And I'm using Fireline because it's a really strong thread again for going through those loops. So I'm going to go through all the way to the second last one on the second last row. And come up through here. And get the ring. Whoosh, went around. All right, got that. Back under, and I'm just going to do that square again. But going the other way. Alright. And where did that even come out of? That came out of there. So let's go back one more time. And just keep weaving in the ends. Whoops. And now you can just snip your threads. And that's the one closure. Now this one is a slide-on magnetic tube, so I'll attach the other one to the other side in the same way. And there you go.